There we go. Okay. For 3 Sundays in a row, I haven't talked very directly about the scriptures, so today really needs to be kind of a catch-up day in that regard. So with that said, we're going to start with the first reading with the hope of better understanding the gospel reading, because the two are most certainly connected. Don't make any mistake about that. So the first reading was from the prophet Isaiah, like most Old Testament readings, in Advent. And we hear today one of the most relevant prophecies for us as Christians. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. Now, we got to clarify this whole prophecy business, because prophecy is tricky stuff. You know, everyone has Star Wars on the brain right now. One complaint I've heard about Star Wars back in the original series was the prophecy of one who shall bring balance to the Force. People complain about that because a prophecy is meaningless if you don't know who said it, when, why, and, in what context. With Isaiah, we know all of that. There is historical context for this prophecy. King Ahaz was the king of Israel during Isaiah's time. Ahaz was one of those kings who was worldly and cunning. He was a good ruler in that cutthroat, knows what he's doing kind of way. But he was not a godly man, and you would never describe him as a nice guy. So he's planning this treaty with Assyria, a neighboring empire. And to make a long story short, this treaty would prove that Ahaz cares more about the power of a king than the power of God. And prophets like Isaiah have a thing or two to say about that. Bad idea. So, Ahaz is a normal dude. Okay. As Pope Benedict describes him, Ahaz is a king who does not think that God is sufficiently real, and Ahaz does not want to be disturbed in his realpolitik. I feel like I describe 9 out of 10 politicians throughout history across the board. So Isaiah gives him a prophecy as a sign from the Lord that his decision to ally with Assyria is not a wise one. The young woman shall conceive and bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. It's a prophecy not just because it sounds cool and mysterious, it serves a purpose. Watch out, king. God is on his way, and he does not fit into your realpolitik. He's going to turn the world upside down. Now, there's a controversial matter here that we have to talk about. Did Isaiah speak of a virgin or a young woman? Those two are pretty much related, but they are clearly not the same thing, are they? Well, first, let me rip the Band-Aid off right away. In the original text, Isaiah says young woman, not virgin. There is no doubt. In the original language, those two words are nothing alike. There is no mistaking it. However, in St. Matthew's Gospel, he very distinctly and intentionally uses the word virgin when referring to Isaiah's prophecy. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that apparent conflict? As I understand it, there are basically 3 theories. I'm not going to tell you which one I favor, but it's not the first one. The first one is the cynical answer. The first one says, Isaiah wrote down young woman, he meant young woman. At some point in history, the text got corrupted, and the Catholic Church has just been wrong about the Virgin Mary this whole time. Sorry, I don't buy it. First of all, it ignores everything else we know about Mary, and it assumes that that one line of Isaiah is our whole Mariology, and that's simply not true. It's a quick and easy answer for people who don't really want to think about the question. The second theory states that Isaiah always meant the prophecy to involve a virgin birth. Regardless of the word he used, the context always meant a virgin birth, because prophecies need to be radical. To say a young woman shall give birth to a son is a little like saying, behold, Saturday will be partly cloudy. Yeah. How could you hear that and respond to anything but, who cares? Or, wow, you can predict the future, with heavy sarcasm. In short, the second theory states that Isaiah must have been talking about a virgin birth because that's not normal. That's not the way it works. It's attention-grabbing, and therefore it's a prophecy. A young woman having a baby fits the expectations of Ahaz's world. A virgin mother does not. I think that's a fair point for consideration. And now we have the third theory. It's a little more complicated. The third theory states that Isaiah made this prophecy, inspired by God, of course. A young woman will give birth to a son and name him Emmanuel. And that prophecy had historic interpretation where the young woman was probably one of Ahaz's wives. So to King Ahaz, this prophecy was simple. It said that his legacy would continue with the help of God, not Assyria. But after that little chapter of history came and went, this prophecy took new life in of its own. So long after Ahaz was laid to rest, people still looked at these words of Isaiah as a sign that Emmanuel, God with us, was still on his way. That should sound a whole lot like Christmas to you when I say it like that. Pope Benedict talked about this book a bunch in his book, The Infancy Narratives. If you haven't read that, you should. It's worth the $8. Specifically, he says, the prophecy is addressed not merely to Ahaz, not merely to Israel, but to humanity. The sign that God himself announces is given not for a specific political situation, but it concerns the whole history of humanity. Later he explains one could say that the figures of the Virgin and the divine child, Mary and Jesus, belong in some sense to the archetypal images of human hope, which emerge at times of crisis and expectation, even without there being any concrete figures in view. He finishes the thought in the chapter on the next page. Hence, the conception and birth of Jesus from the Virgin Mary is a fundamental element of our faith and a radiant sign of hope. That's what I got for you today. When we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate hope above all. Hope that the deliverance of God will bring us salvation, even when we can't understand where that salvation could possibly come from, given the state of the world. It has always been a part of our Christian faith. St. Matthew was very specific about that when he wrote his gospel. And although we don't share this exact part of our faith with our Jewish brothers and sisters, we nevertheless share an inherent desire for hope and restoration in the midst of a broken and conflicted world. We share a common faith in the relevance of prophecy. That great message, which is repeated over and over again in history, that God is truly with us. Emmanuel.